I'm Ian Knowles, the Artistic Director and Theatre Manager here at Chelmsford City Theatres. Welcome to Chelmsford Civic Theatre, albeit sadly only virtually. This is the first of our online Zoom performances as part of Essex 2020 in partnership with the amazing Electric Voice Theatre and Essex Music Education Hub for what was to be a unique summer project actually taking place in our civic theatres over the next couple of months. Alas, as with so much of everyone's daily lives this year, a greater power than we can comprehend has changed everything. So as you will know, we've moved this project online, and thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. For tonight's performances, please look at the chat notes on how to pin the live BSL signing video to your screen for people wishing to follow the signing of this event and any other technical issues. There will be a Q&A session after the performance tonight, so if you have any questions for any of the artists and experts, please send them to everyone in the chat box. Please put your microphones, and in the traditional sense of being in a theatre, your mobile phones on silent. The sounding sessions, of which this is the first tonight, take place every Monday at 7 p.m. This is in addition to our virtual choir sessions starting on Wednesday the 29th of July until the 23rd of September, which are designed for all the family to join in and celebrate the incredible women scientists from around Essex. And of course, for younger children, we have Splash, Burble, Gurgle, Whoosh, taking place 4 times a day from Monday the 3rd to Friday the 7th of August. This is a songwriting event working with real scientists working in the field of water alongside artist Jack Cornell and professional composer Cheryl Francis Hode. Tonight's performance is by our artists and experts, and they are the Electric Voice Theatre Artistic Director, Composer and Singer Francis Lynch, and Production Manager and Sound Engineer Herbie Clark. We are also joined by our Soprano and Director of Barefoot Opera Company, Jenny Miller, our amazing actual real-life scientist, historian and Fellow of Clare College, Cambridge, Dr. Patricia Fara, from Battelle UK, Amy Petts, Analytical Chemistry Technician and STEM Ambassador. Freelance digital artist Jack Cornell, whose work you will see at the end of tonight's piece. And not forgetting, of course, our British Sign Language signer, Lauren Lister. Also on hand are Victoria and Alex from Chelmsford Civic Theatre's marketing team. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's performance of Echoes from Essex Soundings, Margaret Cavendish, the blazing star from Colchester.
Oh, there you are. Oh, I'm so glad you could come. Well, it is an auspicious day, isn't it? The 29th of May, in the year 1660. Oak Apple Day, and the King's birthday. Oh, it's so good to have him back in his England. Oh, especially as he's brought some of his courtiers. Margaret Lucas has come back. Well, she's Cavendish now, because she married a nobleman while she's been away. Oh, it will be wonderful to see her, to have some spectacle and excitement and glamour to look forward to. Oh, I can't wait. Well, actually, you should come with me tonight. I'm going to see if I can catch a glimpse of her on her way to the Essex ball to celebrate the King's return. Oh, I wonder if she'll visit her old home in Colchester. Well, what's left of it anyway. Oh, those Roundheads, they did make an awful mess. Oh, those were troubled times. But anyway, all done now. You know, people say she's very clever. She writes books and she spends a lot of time talking to our greatest thinkers about atoms and stuff like that. Well, some people say she's mad, but I love her. She thinks women should have rights and all. Maybe not for the likes of me. Oh, I I think I can hear. Oh, the musicians are beginning to play in the courtyard where she's getting ready. Oh, I think we'll have to go along. She's looking for a husband, they say. Not for her, for some of the young courtiers. She should have an eye for it, given she bagged the richest man in England. Come on.
Bad husband is worse than no husband at all. A man that's neither high nor low in party or in stature, a rake, a rattle, and a bore, and not unused to flatter, and not unused to flatter. Let him not be a learned fool who nods or musty books, who eats and drinks and lives by rule, and weighs of words and looks, and weighs of words and looks. Let him be easy, free, and gay, of dancing never tired, have always something smart to say, yet silent when required, yet silent when required. Let him be rich, not covetous, nor generous to excess, willing that I should hold the purse and please my self-interest, and please my self-interest. We women live like owls or bats. We labour like beasts and die like worms. A little courage let him have, from insults to protect me, provided that his nurse of bold as ever to contradict me, as ever to contradict me. £10,000 a year I'd like, but if so much can't be, you 7 from the 10 may strike, I'll be content with 3. I'll be content with 3. His face, no matter if 'tis plain, nor let it not be fair. The man my heart is sure to gain, who can with this compare? Who can with this compare? And if some lord should chance agree with this above description, I'm not fond of quality, it shall be no objection, it shall be no objection.
Did you see her? Did you see her? All those strange clothes. Oh, I do love her. That great lady, she thinks women should be seen and heard. Oh, just like my friend there, Dr. Fara. She is a very important person. She is a fellow of Clare College, Cambridge, no less. A woman at a university. Whatever next?
Margaret Cavendish was an extraordinary woman who had very high expectations. She said,
I am as ambitious as ever any of my sex was, is, or can be.
Just can't get it to come out of that speak.
and she succeeded. She became rich, famous, and the author of 20 books. These are just 2 of them. They were all published under her own name, which was unusual then for a woman. You can see on the left, she's promoted herself to Princess, the Duchess of Newcastle. She wrote about science, she wrote poems, and she wrote novels. But she was constantly frustrated by the restrictions imposed on women, and she struggled to transcend them. She craved attention, and she got it. She became the talk of the town, but she was criticised more often than she was praised. As still happens too often in science today, she attracted more comments for her behaviour and her appearance than for her expertise. Here she's presenting herself as a restoration beauty. This portrait celebrates when her husband, William Cavendish, was made Duke of Newcastle by King Charles II. They'd already been married for 20 years, and he was one of the richest men in England. But she hadn't started out in such a privileged situation. You can see from the words at the bottom, she was the daughter of Thomas Lucas from Essex, the second wife of William Cavendish. So she was passed on from one man to another, from her father to her husband. So she's born in 1623 in Colchester, and you can see from the map how small it was then. Her father's house was in the grounds of St John's Abbey, and most of it had been destroyed, but this tower still stands. Her father died when she was 2, leaving her mother in charge as an early and wonderful role model. Traditionally, girls and boys were educated differently. Boys learnt from books. They were taught subjects like Latin and maths. In contrast, girls learnt music and embroidery and domestic skills. But there were lots of books in her house, and her elder brothers helped her to get a more masculine education. She knew that the only realistic way for her to compete with men was by writing.
Men hold books as their crown, by which they rule and govern.
And on the left, you can see the frontispiece for her book on philosophy. She's standing on a pedestal in an image of power. It's a pose that French people called a heroic woman. And on her left, you can see Minerva with a helmet and a lance. She was the goddess of war as well as of wisdom. And on the right of the picture is Apollo holding a lyre to represent poetry and music. Margaret Cavendish wrote many poems and novels, and she was an excellent singer, but she also speculated about scientific ideas. She came from a very strong royalist family. Their house was once besieged by 2,000 parliamentarianisms, and she spent 3 nights in jail. Her brothers went off to fight for the king, and she begged her mother to let her be a lady-in-waiting for the Queen, Henrietta Maria, who took over Merton College in Oxford. But soon the royal court was forced to flee to Paris. In 1645, she met and married another royalist, William Cavendish. He was much older than her, but they enjoyed a very loving relationship, and he totally supported her writing. She learnt about science from his brother and from their large collection of microscopes. Unfortunately, much of the Duke's wealth was confiscated, so they sought refuge in Antwerp. She travelled to England by herself to try to restore his money and his lands, and it was during this period that she first began to write. She complained because as a woman she couldn't go to university.
I am not versed in learning. Nobody, I hope, will blame me for it, since it is sufficiently known that our sex is not bred up to it, as being not suffered to be instructed in schools and universities.
She had been very shy, but now she learnt how to promote herself. Her husband encouraged her and paid for the publication of her books. So this is another frontispiece from one of her books, and it shows the family dinner table. She's sitting at the right-hand end. And because she was married to Newcastle, she could meet his circle of scholarly friends and hear about the latest scientific ideas. The rhyme shows how much she valued these conversations. The rhyme shows how much she valued these conversations.
Thus, in this semicircle where they sit, telling of tales of pleasure and of wit, here you may read without a sin or crime, and how more innocently pass your time.
So at this time, Isaac Newton was still a child, and the leading philosopher was the French René Descartes, who she met when she was in Paris. He insisted that everything is made of tiny atoms. So, for example, on the right, there's a circular magnet with teeny particles circulating round and through it. And this is an extract from her poem, A World Made by Atoms.
Atoms of themselves a world may make, as being subtle and of every shape, and as they dance around, fit places find such forms as best agree, make every kind. For when we clear the house.
But she didn't just describe ideas, she also challenged them, and she became extremely controversial because she opposed conventional ideas about God, life, and the world. So this was a standard sort of view. Atoms are inert, rather like pool balls on a table, that need to be struck with a cue to make them move. And similarly, atomic movement comes from God. But Cavendish said that matter is somehow alive, that it can move itself. As a vitalist or materialist view, that life doesn't depend on a divine spark.
Self-moving matter, which is sensitive and rational, is the only cause and principle of all natural effect.
So this was a very unpopular view, and she was branded as an atheist. She constantly tried out new thoughts, so it's hard to pin down exactly what she did believe. But her conjectures resonate with modern philosophy, and the nature of life is still a major unresolved question. So in 1660, King Charles was restored to the throne, and the Newcastles came back to England, and they settled down happily to a secluded life in the country. And the king founded the Royal Society. On the left, you can see a sketch of their royal coat of arms. And then in May 1667, Cavendish invited herself to a meeting of the Royal Society to watch experiments. Most people were more interested in her appearance than in what she had to say. People lined the streets to watch her pass by in her grand carriage. And Samuel Pepys wrote in his diary,
"A good, comely woman, but her dress so antic, and her deportment so ordinary. that I did not like her at all.
So here that word antic means eccentric, and that was the term most often used to describe her. On the other hand, there wasn't an established identity for scholarly women. She'd have been criticised however she behaved. So she modelled herself on Queen Christina of Sweden. You can see in the picture she's the only woman in a room full of men. She's actually talking to Descartes. And in the medal on the right, Christina is portrayed as Minerva in a feathered helmet. Like Queen Christina, Margaret Cavendish sometimes cross-dressed. She wanted people to listen to her ideas, and she attracted attention by behaving outrageously. And that was a successful self-promotion strategy. She antagonised people by being an outspoken woman, but she articulated some profound and perceptive comments on the way science is carried out. The most popular science book of the time was Robert Hooke's Micrographia. It's a stunning collection of beautiful drawings showing tiny insects through a microscope like this flea. But she challenged Hooke.
The inspection of a bee through a microscope will bring him no more honey.
This is a very fundamental question. Is scientific knowledge useful for its own sake or for the benefits it brings? And because she'd used a microscope herself, she knew how difficult it is to see anything clearly, and she accused Hooke of producing beautiful works of art, but did they truly show reality? She wanted science to be useful, to discover
how to increase our breed of animals and our stores of vegetables, and to find out the minerals for our use.
And she put a positive spin on her lack of formal education by emphasising that she was writing in English rather than Latin and using ordinary words that everybody could understand.
Plain and vulgarly expressed, as having not so much learning as to puzzle the reader with logistical, metaphysical, mathematical, or the like term.
And you can see from that quotation that spelling was not very standard. That is how she wrote puzzle. Nowadays, her most famous book is a description of a new world called the Blazing World. It's available in paperback, it's also been translated. It's a utopian science fiction novel and also a personal fantasy about a young woman who's abducted and ends up marrying an emperor and becoming very rich and powerful. And this picture that I've used is actually a symbol of global warming, exactly the sort of topic Margaret Cavendish would have been incensed about. And in the book, she criticises experimental science at the Royal Society by imagining ape men and bird men who talk nonsense. There's quite a bit of wish fulfillment. Here she imagines an all-powerful empress with the bear men, the astronomers, begging at her feet.
The bear men kneeled down and in the humblest manner petitioned that their telescopes might not be broken. For, said they, we take more delight in artificial delusions than in natural truths.
So in the book, Cavendish herself features as a very wise philosopher who imagines ruling her own world, dedicated to peace and honesty. So in gender terms, it's a very radical book. On the other hand, politically, it was very conservative. She decides that the best form of government is an absolutist monarchy, not a democracy. So it also reflects her own experiences as an exiled royalist. So a few years after this book came out, Margaret Cavendish died suddenly when she was only 50. But she had certainly fulfilled her aim.
I am as ambitious as ever any of my sex was, is, or can be.
So these three pictures summarise her career. Born in Colchester, she worked with the Queen, she lived in Paris, she married one of England's richest men. And when she died, she was so famous that she was buried in Westminster Abbey, where she still lies.
Westminster Abbey? Oh, yes, I was there. I saw the whole thing. Yeah, I wouldn't have missed that funeral for the world. Oh, it was wonderful. All those horses and men, the procession that came all the way from Welbeck Abbey. The courtiers were beautifully dressed and the women were crying. Well, except for the Duke's daughters. He built a tomb for her. Oh, he loved that woman. And I think she loved him too. On the tomb, you see a line with a book and a pen to write with, as if she's going to write when she's dead. That's really strange, though, because he's lying beside her and he's not dead yet. It's good what he wrote about her, though. She was a wise and witty woman. Well, that's what the Masons told me they were writing. Well, got to get back to work now. Yeah, tomorrow I've got to go and visit my brother's farm. He's having a bad time with the potatoes. Our cousin in Ireland said that they'd be good, easy to grow and cheap, but we can't get the hang of it, really. I might get this all muddy, this apron. That's the only thing I'm worried about. You can't have a white coat. Oh, I wonder if that Miss Amy Petts would have been able to help us then. Yeah, that would have been good, but she couldn't have worn her white coat, not on a farm with all that mud. Oh, yeah, she did say that she has mud as well. Oh, I don't know, it's all very complicated. I think I'd better get her to explain. I'll leave you to it, Miss Petts.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Petts and I work for a company called Battelle UK. We are an analytical science company. We aim to produce study data, be it environmental fate or residues, that will help us assess the environmental impact of chemicals. We predominantly work with agrochemicals such as pesticides, but we also look at things like pharmaceuticals. You can't go spraying new compounds on fields without them being tested and wait to see what happens. So we conduct a series of laboratory tests designed to evaluate the behaviour of the substance before they are allowed to be used. Then we make use of models and evaluation procedures to assess the compounds. We're going to follow the journey of a pesticide from an environmental fate point of view. At step 1, the farmer would spray his field with a chemical, in this case to stop some bugs eating his potato plants. Some of the chemical will remain on the surface, as seen at step 2. We need to know how long it stays there and what it might break down into. At step 3, we're looking at how some of the chemical might filter through the soil, particularly during wet weather. It is more likely to stay in the soil, or is it more likely to go into the groundwater? At point 4, we look at how some of the chemical might run off of the surface of the soil into nearby lakes or reservoirs. We need to know if it will prefer the water or the lakebed sediment, and how it will break down, and what effect this might have on drinking water. And finally, at step 5, we look at the impact that the sun could have on the chemical. If the UV light is strong, it could break down the chemical in a different way. These are just some of the questions we hope to answer. And a residue perspective would be looking at the residues of the chemical with the potatoes. Has the crop absorbed any of the chemical? Are the potatoes safe to eat? We have to check that there is no compound left in the potatoes, and that when you go to the supermarket and you take them home, you can trust that they're not going to do you any harm. In order to answer all of these questions, we carry out controlled testing in the labs. We mock up different environmental situations, as seen in the top left picture, here working on reservoir water, and we keep the samples at a constant temperature and carry out experiments at set time points in order to track any trends. A variety of methods are used to try and extract chemicals out of the potatoes. For example, shaking with solvent. In order for it to be in a format that we can analyse, we need a liquid compound to go through the mass spec, which is shown in the bottom left corner. These are some examples of the sorts of results we would get. And this gives us a visual representation of what is going on in that potato.
Well, I didn't know any of that before. She could have probably helped with the potatoes. I wonder if she knows about Margaret Cavendish, because she came from Essex. Miss Pett, do you know about Margaret Cavendish? I mean, she did all sorts of things like you. She used to look down microscopes too. I believe that you could see really small things really big. But I would have thought that was something men wanted to do. I know someone who could tell you a bit about Margaret Cavendish. She's Dr. Fara. She could have a chat with you and tell you all about her and could ask you questions and everything.
Sounds good.
Hi, Amy. Had you ever heard of Margaret Cavendish before?
I hadn't heard of her before today. I've enjoyed finding out much more about her.
So how important is it for you that she comes from Essex?
I think it's so important to know that there is, this legacy of female scientists in the area, and it's nice to be a small part of that continuing.
Absolutely. So, Margaret Cavendish spent a lot of her time sitting at home, writing and reading her books. So her life was very different from yours. I wondered if you could just give us an idea. What's the sort of typical day like for you? You go into the lab, you make a strong cup of coffee, you switch on the computer, then what happens?
So I get ready in my lab coat. 9 times out of 10, I'm playing with some sort of mud, which I understand to most people seems like a ridiculous thing to be doing for a living. Some days I'll be actually working with the soil, I'll be checking how much water content is in there and if it's suitable for our use. Other days I'll be taking some radioactive material, which is another version of our pesticide we might be testing, and applying it to the soil. And then a few days later, I'll be trying to take it back out of the soil to see what it's done.
Well, I don't Margaret Cavendish would have thought much of the lab coat, and I personally don't think much of the mud. So I wonder, what was it that drew you to do this sort of science?
So the main push for me was my chemistry teacher at school. I've always enjoyed science, but when it got to A-level particularly, she really encouraged me with my chemistry, and that led me towards the analytical side of things. The mud is just an added bonus for 3-year-old me to finally be able to play with it and not be in trouble.
So Margaret Cavendish had Queen Christina of Sweden as her role model, and you had your teacher at school. How important do you think female role models are for women in science?
I think it's really important, especially today. There's so much work going on, especially in the STEM community, at trying to break the stereotype of, the typical Einstein picture with the crazy hair. And it's nice to be able to say, there are women in science, it's commonplace now, and having people to look up to inspire you to continue that, I think is completely invaluable.
And have you ever experienced exclusion or discrimination as a woman in science?
So far, I have been very lucky. Battelle, where I work, we actually have a fairly female predominant technical team. The only, male dominant area would be the management. And I think that's just because it's taken so long for women to be able to establish themselves in scientific careers. They've just got to keep working their way up, and hopefully in another 5-10 years, we'll be at a much more balanced place.
And I believe you've got children yourself, but if you did have children, how do you think that would affect your career?
I don't think it would impact me negatively at all. As far as I'm aware, maternity programs for most places where I work are, very good. And there's always risk assessments in place because we're handling all sorts of chemicals. And, we want to make sure that for expecting mothers that they're going to be safe and that their baby will be safe too.
Well, that's important. What about childcare after you've had the baby?
I don't have anywhere near enough experience about that to be able to comment.
That's fine. But I think, you painted a very rosy picture of equality for women in science, but do you think women are still sometimes judged by their appearance rather than by their skills?
I think there's definitely an aspect of that. I know when I go out and I do my STEM outreach work, I get a lot of surprised looks when I say, oh yeah, I do science, I'm an analytical chemist, because even now it's just not, I'm not what people expect. I'm not, you know, this middle-aged man who's very serious looking. And I think although it doesn't affect me day to day, and in the professional world there's no judgment on how you look compared to how well you can do a job, but there is still that external stereotype that we are determined to change.
It is very important. So I'm going to start by asking you the sort of big philosophical question.
Yeah, okay.
You're a chemist, you're dealing with chemicals all the time, but you're also a human being. Now, do you think that your body is just a collection of chemicals that somehow magically manage to speak and talk and think? Or do you think there's some extra something which makes us different from, I don't know, a table or a chair or something like that?
I'll say it's a very interesting question. There's the science part of me who is very much of a, it's in our DNA, it's the genetics, and it's very ordered, and there must be some sort of structure and science behind the way that we can function. But then when you look at natural selection, we have developed all of these extra things that so many other species haven't. And that does make me wonder if there is something underlying that just gives us that edge. And it's a very interesting point to think about.
I sort of agree with you, but I think it's interesting. That was what Margaret Cavendish was talking about 400 years ago. And we're so proud of the way that science has advanced, and in some ways it has. But on the other hand, these fundamental questions of what life is, what matter is, they just haven't been resolved. So there's a continuous line between us and the work that Margaret Cavendish was doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's still a lot of work that can be done. We're just not quite there yet.
Right. So where's our hostess gone? I think it's been lovely to talk to you, Amy.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
I think
Margaret Cavendish would have loved to talk to them, I reckon. But no more time for talking. I need to retire now. I hope I have the dream I had last night. Oh, it was beautiful. Margaret Cavendish is a musician. She's a woman, you know. Annabel Malton. She was playing her tenor viol. And Margaret Cavendish was singing away her own words from her book. And then there was Jack, our farm boy, Jack Cornell, his name is. He makes pennies on the side, drawing pictures of the nobility. They love it. Margaret Cavendish was one of them. But in the dream, he's painting pictures in the sky. Thoughts are like stars in the firmament. Some are fixed, others like the wandering planets. Others again are only like meteors. Understanding is like the sun, which gives light to all the thoughts, which gives light to all the thoughts. Memory is like the moon, it hath its new, its full, and its wane, its wane.
heart.